You gave your heart, your time, your energy, and somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing it. He stopped appreciating you. He assumed you'd always be there. But here's the truth. The person who takes you for granted is writing their own regret story. They just don't know it yet. And when you finally pull away, when you stop giving what they never earned, that's when regret kicks in. Not because you changed, but because they finally see what they lost. So if you've ever been taken for granted, keep listening, because this is your wake-up call and his breaking point. Being taken for granted is one of the most painful emotional experiences. Not because you did something wrong, but because you gave your best to someone who failed to recognize it. That failure isn't about your worth. It's about their ability, or rather inability, to see clearly. When someone takes you for granted, it often means they became so used to your love, your loyalty, your presence, that they began to treat it as a given instead of a gift. They didn't stop to think, how lucky am I that this person shows up for me every day? They just assumed you always would. And this is where we get stuck. We start to internalize their behavior. We tell ourselves that maybe if we were more exciting, more distant, more mysterious, more something, they would have appreciated us more. But the truth is, you weren't the problem. Their lack of appreciation wasn't a measure of your value. It was a measure of their emotional immaturity, their lack of presence, and their inability to connect with something real. Some people don't understand love unless it's complicated, unless they have to chase it, unless it's uncertain. And when you come in with something healthy, secure, and real, it feels almost boring to them, not because it is, but because they're not used to calm. They're addicted to chaos. So they mislabel your consistency as clinginess. Your loyalty becomes predictability. Your kindness becomes background noise. And when someone stops noticing what you bring to the table, they start eating with their eyes closed. But here's the thing, just because they were blind to it doesn't mean it wasn't there. Just because they didn't value it doesn't mean it wasn't valuable. It's like handing someone a diamond and watching them toss it aside because they don't recognize what it is. That diamond doesn't become worthless, it just wasn't recognized for what it was by someone who was never taught how to spot something real. Eventually they will learn. Regret has a way of creeping in when the silence gets loud, when you're no longer there to text them goodnight, when you're no longer checking in, when they notice your energy has been completely withdrawn, and more importantly, redirected. Regret doesn't usually hit them when you're still trying to make it work. It hits when you stop trying, when you're done explaining, when you've made peace with the fact that they didn't appreciate what they had. And that's what's powerful. You don't need to prove your worth to them. You don't need to scream it, post about it, or try to make them see it, because someone else's failure to see your value doesn't reduce it. In fact, it puts you in a stronger position to protect it. Sometimes being taken for granted is the very experience that teaches you to never hand over that much of yourself to someone who hasn't earned it. So yes, they may one day look back and realize they lost something irreplaceable. They'll remember how safe it felt with you, how supported they were, how rare that level of consistency and care really is. But by then it may be too late. You'll have outgrown the version of yourself that needed their approval. You'll have realized that their regret is just that, theirs, not yours to fix, not yours to validate, not yours to wait for. Because being taken for granted doesn't mean you weren't valuable. It just means they weren't ready for someone who was. There's something incredibly powerful that happens when you take a step back from someone who never truly appreciated you. That space, that silence, that absence, it teaches more than words ever could. See, as long as you're available, as long as you're reaching out, checking in, forgiving quickly, showing up without hesitation, the other person gets comfortable. They believe, whether consciously or not, that no matter how they treat you, you'll still be there. That belief is what allows them to undervalue you, not because you lack value, but because they've never had to feel the risk of losing you. When we talk about someone realizing your worth, we often picture a heartfelt conversation, a moment of clarity, a dramatic change. But the truth is, most people don't truly feel what you meant to them until you stop being there. And not in a petty or manipulative way, just in a quiet, firm, self-respecting way. You stop calling, you stop chasing, you stop bending yourself to meet their emotional availability. And then something shifts. They start to notice the little things first. The text you don't send, the way your name stops lighting up their phone, the absence of your energy. And for the first time, they feel what it's like to be without what they never thought they'd lose. That's when the weight of your presence really hits them. Because your presence was never loud, never forceful. It was steady, kind, comforting. And now that it's gone, they're left with a silence they can't ignore. They underestimate how much of an impact consistency has until it disappears. You were their emotional safety net, even if they never admitted it. You were the one they knew they could count on. And when you finally stop showing up, when you finally stop filling in the gaps and covering for their shortcomings, they're forced to confront the reality they'd been avoiding, that you were doing more for the relationship than they were willing to see. That's where regret starts to build. Not because you made them feel bad, but because life without your presence feels hollow. It's not revenge, it's reflection. And that reflection is often brutal. They start comparing what they had with what they now have, or more accurately, what they don't have. Maybe they try to move on, maybe they distract themselves. But there's a gap now, a space in their life that used to be filled by your love, your patience, your emotional labor. And no matter how much they try to fill it, it doesn't feel the same. Because it's not. The truth is, people often confuse availability with permanence. They think because you are always there, you always will be. But distance has a way of rewriting that narrative. When you remove your presence, you're not punishing them, you're just choosing you. And in doing so, you become a mirror they can't avoid. One that reflects all the ways they failed to meet you halfway. All the ways they mistook consistency for weakness. All the ways they let someone amazing slip through their fingers. This is why distance is such an incredible teacher. It doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it just exists. And in that space, the truth becomes undeniable. They didn't appreciate you, they didn't see what was right in front of them. And now they're left to sit with the consequences of that choice. But for you, that same distance becomes freedom, a chance to reclaim your energy, to redirect it toward people and places that recognize your worth without you having to prove it. You start to heal, you start to grow, and eventually you reach a point where their regret no longer matters because you've created a life that makes you grateful they didn't hold on. Regret is a powerful emotion, and it doesn't show up randomly. It's the result of realization of clarity that comes too late. When someone has had something good, something rare, and they let it slip away, regret is what fills the silence left behind. And more often than not, that regret comes when they realize they walked away from peace, loyalty, and love because they mistook it for something less valuable. They didn't lose it because it was lacking. They lost it because they weren't ready to receive it. There's a sad irony in how people chase after things that are unstable, unavailable, or emotionally distant. And yet when they finally met with something secure and consistent, they feel bored or overwhelmed. That kind of healthy love, the one that shows up for you every day without the games, can be deeply confronting for someone who hasn't done the inner work. They say they want something real, but when it's in front of them, they don't know how to handle it. So they pull away, they create distance. They start to rationalize their decision with phrases like "it just didn't feel right" or "I need space," when in reality, what they're really saying is, "this feels unfamiliar and I don't know how to deal with it." And so they trade peace for chaos. Loyalty for excitement, security for something uncertain, simply because the uncertainty feels more aligned with their own emotional turbulence. But what they fail to understand in the moment is that love rooted in peace isn't boring, it's mature. It's stable, it's what everyone is actually craving when the dust of drama settles. But by the time they figure that out, it's often too late. The relationship they took for granted has moved on. You've moved on, and now regret starts to take hold. It's in the quiet moments when they scroll through old messages or remember how it felt to have someone who truly cared that regret starts to sting. It's when they realize no one else texts them just to check in or remembers their important days or listens without judgment. They start to notice how rare that kind of love was, how rare you were, and they start to understand that they had something most people spend their lives searching for, and they let it go. This isn't about painting you as perfect or them as a villain. It's about the very human tendency to misunderstand what we need until we've lost it. Some people have to learn the hard way that love isn't meant to be dramatic or difficult, that the real kind of connection feels like safety, not chaos. And when they look back and realize they gave that up for a fleeting thrill or out of fear, the regret doesn't just hurt, it breaks them down. You were the calm in their storm, the one who loved them even when they didn't love themselves. And when they pushed you away, they assumed they could find that kind of love again. But over time, they realized they were wrong. That kind of connection doesn't come around often. That kind of loyalty isn't easily replaced. And what's worse is they know it was their choice to lose it. That's the heart of real regret. The awareness that they had everything they needed and couldn't see it until it was gone. It's not just about losing you, it's about knowing they were the reason. And no matter how much they try to forget, distract, or replace, that kind of truth doesn't go away. It lingers, it teaches, and sometimes it haunts. When someone hurts you, disrespects you, or takes you for granted, it's natural to want some kind of justice. You want them to feel what you felt. You want them to realize they made a mistake. But the truth is, life has a way of handling people far better than we ever could. You don't have to break someone to teach them a lesson. You don't have to scream, beg, or try to prove a point. You just have to stop giving your energy to someone who never appreciated it in the first place. And that alone is enough to shift everything. There's this illusion that closure comes from getting an apology, seeing them suffer, or hearing them say, "I was wrong." But real closure doesn't require any of that. Real closure comes when you decide to stop trying to change the narrative, stop hoping they'll wake up, and instead start protecting your peace. Because the more you chase fairness or revenge, the more you remain energetically tied to someone who already showed you they don't deserve a front row seat in your life. Walking away is not weakness, it's power. And not the kind of power that comes from control or manipulation, but the kind that says, "I love myself enough to stop explaining my worth to someone who couldn't see it." That's when everything starts to change. When you finally stop showing up for someone who expected you to always be there, they feel it. Maybe not right away, maybe not in the dramatic way your heart secretly hopes for, but life catches up with everyone. And when it does, it doesn't whisper, it echoes. People eventually realize what they've lost when their comfort zone is gone. When they can't run to you anymore. When your energy, your support, your reassurance is no longer available on demand. Suddenly they're left with themselves. No distractions, no buffer, just the consequences of their actions. And that's when regret sets in, not because you made them feel bad, but because life is finally showing them what they refused to see when it mattered. The most painful realization someone can have is understanding they were the reason something beautiful ended. And that realization doesn't come from your revenge, it comes from your silence, from your absence, from you getting on with your life and building something better without them. You don't need to watch them break down, you don't need to get daily updates on their regret. That's not healing, that's obsession. And you deserve more than living in a loop of pain disguised as justice. Your energy is sacred, and when you reclaim it, when you stop pouring it into people who only drain it, that's when your life starts to expand. You meet people who recognize your value the first time. You find joy in your own company again. You build a life so full, so peaceful that the thought of going back to someone who couldn't appreciate you feels like a version of you that no longer exists. They may suffer, they may regret, they may fall apart, but none of that is your responsibility. You didn't come into their life to be their lesson, but you might end up being exactly that. And the best part, you don't have to lift a finger. Life teaches, time reveals, and regret does the rest while you keep moving forward, quietly, confidently, free. When someone underestimates your value, there's usually a point where you feel the need to prove it. You try harder, you explain yourself more, you give them more chances, hoping they'll finally get it. But eventually there comes a moment when you stop doing all of that. You stop explaining, stop reaching out, stop showing up for someone who never met you halfway. And what you don't always realize at first is that your absence is about to become the loudest message you've ever sent. You don't need a dramatic exit or a big confrontation. You don't need to write long messages about how they hurt you or how they should have treated you better. All of that is noise to someone who's not listening. The truth is, your silence is far more powerful than your words. When someone has gotten used to you always being there, texting back, forgiving quickly, checking in, showing love, they come to expect it. They take it for granted, like the sun rising every day. It's not until that pattern is broken that they start to feel the weight of what they've lost. When you stop calling, they notice. When you don't respond to the message they sent at midnight, they feel it. When your energy is no longer available to them, they start to wonder what changed. At first, they may not admit it, even to themselves. They may try to act unaffected, but make no mistake, your absence echoes louder than any argument ever could. The thing about emotionally mature people is that they don't need to be chased. They value consistency and effort. But when someone isn't emotionally ready or willing to grow, they often misinterpret peace for boredom and stability for weakness. So they'll only understand what they had when it's no longer around to comfort them. That's when they start looking back. That's when they remember all the ways you showed up, the way you cared, how easy it was to talk to you, how deeply they were supported without even realizing it. This realization never comes in a flash, it builds slowly. They might go out and talk to other people, try to fill the space with distractions, but none of it compares to the calm and safety they once had with you. And that's when regret begins to settle in, not because you forced it, but because your absence created a space where reflection could finally happen. The emotional safety net they always had is gone, and now they are falling through that gap with no one to catch them. You don't need to monitor their regret or sit around waiting for them to realize. You don't need them to tell you they're sorry to know your worth. That's the beauty of healing. You begin to understand that your value was never in question. It was only misunderstood by someone who wasn't ready to receive it. And once you step away, your silence becomes a mirror. It forces them to look at what they lost without your words softening the blow. Some people will try to come back, not because they've changed, but because they missed the comfort you gave. That's why your silence needs to be followed by self-respect. Don't just go quiet, grow, heal. Create a life that is so full of purpose and peace that even if they do return, you're no longer available in the way you once were. Your absence is your closure. It speaks for you. It says, I'm no longer begging to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding me. And when that silence is backed by self-worth, it says everything they were too late to hear. There's a deep kind of freedom that comes when you stop watching someone who once meant so much to you. The title says, watch regret break him. But the reality is, when you truly heal and grow, you don't even check if he's broken or not. Your life moves beyond the need for validation from someone who never appreciated you. That's the ultimate power, not in watching their downfall, but in living your best life without them. At first, it's tempting to want to see the regret play out. You imagine moments where he'll realize what he lost, where he feels the emptiness you left behind. It feels like closure to witness the person who hurt you finally understand the consequences of their actions. But what many don't realize is that holding on to that need to watch, to witness, to wait, keeps you tethered to the past. It keeps you emotionally invested in someone who no longer deserves your time or energy. True healing means letting go of that attachment. It means moving from a place where your happiness depends on his realization to a place where your happiness is entirely your own. When you stop watching, you stop giving your energy away. You reclaim it and redirect it toward yourself. You begin to invest in your dreams, your goals, and your peace. This shift isn't easy because it requires surrendering the idea of control. You can't control how someone else feels or whether they regret losing you, but you can control how you respond. You can decide not to give their regret a starring role in your story. And when you make that decision, you open the door to genuine freedom. Imagine waking up and not wondering what he's thinking or feeling. Imagine scrolling through your phone without searching for his name or hoping for a message. Imagine being fully present in your own life, experiencing joy and growth that have nothing to do with someone else's mistakes. That's the kind of peace that breaks the cycle of regret on your end. It's also important to realize that by stepping away, you're not just protecting your peace. You're setting a powerful example. You're showing that self-worth isn't dependent on someone else's recognition. You're demonstrating that healing looks like moving forward, not looking back. And sometimes that example is the most profound lesson a person can learn. Holding on to the desire to watch his regret can keep you stuck in a loop of pain and resentment. It's like rereading the same chapter of a book, hoping the ending will change. But life doesn't work that way. The best thing you can do is turn the page and start a new chapter where your story is about your growth, your happiness, and your self-love. The reality is, when you focus on yourself, the need to watch his regret fades. You stop caring about whether he's broken or not because you've already built something stronger, a life where your value is recognized and celebrated, not questioned or ignored. That's the ultimate victory, not revenge, not seeing someone fall, but rising so high above the pain and disappointment that you no longer have the energy or the desire to look back. Your future is brighter than your past, and that's what matters most. So instead of waiting for him to regret losing you, focus on being the best version of yourself. Create a life so fulfilling that regret becomes irrelevant. Because when you do that, you don't just break the cycle of regret, you break free from it completely. At the end of the day, the true power lies not in watching someone else's regret unfold, but in reclaiming your own peace and moving forward with confidence. When you stop seeking validation from those who failed to see your worth, you free yourself to live fully, love deeply, and grow beyond what you once thought possible. Remember, your value isn't defined by who stayed or who left, but by how you choose to honor yourself after it's all said and done. So don't wait for regret to break him. Focus on healing yourself, because that's the real victory.